Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a Wednesday one-shot here on Shooting the Shelf. Uh, this is my buddy John, John Arminio. He is a longtime friend, co-worker from the comic shop, and all-around awesome guy. Very knowledgeable about movies and lots of things. And we recently watched a movie on your recommendation.
Yes.
So why don't you tell the folks what that is?
So it's the HBO documentary Stevie Van Zandt, Disciple, directed by Bill Teck, produced by Rob Cotto. And, Jesse, I don't know, I don't think you have any sort of preconceived notions about Stevie Van Zandt. I've been a diehard Bruce Springsteen fan for as long as I can remember. Like since I was a little kid, my dad's family are Italians from New Jersey, so grew up with Bruce Springsteen's music. I've known who Stevie Van Zandt is for almost as long, I am privileged to know the director Bill Teck. I've podcasted with him a couple times, and Bill's one of those guys where you talk to him for 5 minutes and it feels like you've known him all your life. Like he's just so friendly, so engaging, so smart. And I've had a 4-hour conversation with him about Indiana Jones. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So great guy. And one of the associate producers, Bill Scurry, is a friend of mine as well. So I have a lot of connections to this movie.
And real quick, if I can say real quick, for all the people who made fun of me because I said I watched a documentary with a friend who knows the director, I wasn't trying to name drop and puff myself up. I literally my friend is a friend of theirs and he wanted to watch this. So that's you.
Yeah. So you
can all suck it.
So I really appreciate you watching this with me because I did want to get just the perspective of somebody who didn't have so much baggage with the film because I really admire Stevie Van Zandt for his musicianship, for his political activism, for just his personality, for his advocacy of music in general. And so because you're an open-minded, kind-hearted person, I wanted to watch this with you and get your perspective. And I was really touched by how much you enjoyed this 2.5-hour documentary about a guy you really had no opinion on. So thank you so much.
No, you're welcome. So a couple weeks ago, so John usually comes over Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, and we'll watch a movie or a show together. Every now and then I'll trek out to the movies with him if schedules align and everything, which we haven't done that in a while, so we should do that soon.
Yeah.
But he sent me a link. He's like, hey, would you have any interest in watching this? No worries if you don't. I know it's a documentary and that's not really your jam. So I see it and I'm like, I know this name. What? And I clicked on it. I start watching it and I'm like, I'm going to be open-minded because John's a smart guy. He's very knowledgeable. He knows me. He's not going to offer up something that I'm going to be completely opposed to. And I start watching this trailer and a minute into it, a couple things they mentioned, how he becomes this successful musician and he's with, the E Street Band, Bruce Springsteen, all this stuff. And then he just walks away to go do advocacy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And talks about specifically about South Africa and apartheid and everything in the late 80s, early 90s. And I was like, I stopped the trailer and I was like, all right, John, I'm in. Because for those of you who don't know, South Africa is very near and dear to my heart. So that intrigued me. And I'm like, I don't want to watch the rest of this trailer because I want to wait and see. Mm-hmm. I want to see the rest of the documentary just as it unfolds. So John came over about 2 weeks ago or so, or whenever from the recording of this episode. And we fired up Max and started watching this. And I got to say, for a documentary, it was probably one of the most engaging, inspiring, and uplifting things I've ever watched as far as a documentary goes.
Yeah, I mean, like, Bill Teck has another great documentary called One Day Since Yesterday, which is about the movie They All Laughed, which was a Peter Bogdanovich comedy that was really underseen for a long, long time. And he has a way, Bill Teck has a way of editing his films to keep them just exciting and engaging. He uses so many found elements in Disciple, like so much music, you know, family photographs, um, like images and interviews you've never seen. This really artful combination of interviews filmed for this documentary, but also like vintage stuff. And so you get to see
Hmm.
behind the scenes footage. Like you get to see, Stevie Van Zandt in the studio recording this Sun City record with Miles Davis and
Hmm.
Ruben Blades and filming the movie with Jonathan Demme, like all this stuff, and him in South Africa, and Van Zant's own really unique and engaging perspective. Like you get to see why Van Zant was able to wrangle this panoply of just brilliant musicians for this record, but also like why Eddie Vedder, Paul McCartney, Richie Sambora, the director Chris Columbus, all
Hmm.
want to talk about Stevie. And I think you get a really like wonderful perspective on a beautiful life that's touched so many people.
Yeah, it's just watching it, and part of the in the trailer you saw, you see like Paul McCartney, Bono, Bruce Springsteen, like some of those, really big iconic names that everybody knows.
Mhm.
And then there's all these other names. I'm like, oh, I kind of, and then you get into it. And when they play some of the history now, I'm not as well versed in the history of stuff. So like, I didn't know who Southside Johnny was. I'd never heard of Gary U.S. Bonds or some of these other musicians, and some of the ones that like inspired him. So like the fact that he was looking back, like I would have never have known from the sound of what I know of Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, like some of their origins that they get
Mhm.
into in this. And it was just really cool, like you said, some of the found footage, the family, the stuff. And just one of the things we talked about after the show watching it was like how I'm blanking on her name, but the woman who kind of like was like the den mother of this
Yeah,
group of
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
misfit musicians that like allowed this kind of scene to develop, at the, what was it, the Stone Pony,
Yeah, the Stone Pony in
and
Asbury
different
Park.
things. Yeah. And it's just, like I said, usually I see a documentary about, musicians or a rock band or something. Okay. Oh, sex, drugs, rock and roll, like that's usually the first thing,
Mhm.
it crosses my mind. And then watching this, I'm not saying that none of those things were part of his life, but like they didn't focus on it.
Yeah.
It wasn't this, that, and then one day, Stevie wakes up in the hotel room, like near OD, and it's all these like tragic, thing. Like the director really found like all the inspiring things, and even some of the things, he had pushback with his friends, for leaving, and just kind of like what's going on, and it just felt like a very real human story about a person, trying to find their place in the world amongst all the people they love, and doing good in the world.
Yeah.
And I thought
Yeah,
that was,
and he has a rock and roll brother in Bruce Springsteen, and they go really in depth into their relationship and how fruitful it was and how painful it was for both of them when Van Zant left the E Street Band, and how great it was when they reunited. Because I think like any family, you you love each other, but you can't spend your entire life uh, together, and you really get that
mhm.
impression, and you get a really beautiful portrait of his marriage. And
Yeah.
it's rare to see a musician of that level married to the same person for 40 some years. and you get to see, why their relationship
Mhm.
is so stable and has been able to weather so many storms. And you'd also be hard pressed to find an artist who's championed so many causes so fervently and so genuinely. Now,
Mhm.
there's a ton of celebrities who use their celebrity and wealth for good causes, but Van Zandt like really put himself out there, not just for apartheid, but for like the disappeared in South America, who
Mhm.
were victims of dictators, like executing them, or for Native American rights, and even if it's everyone is for dictators not executing people, but he was still the person who was like, no, Americans need to know that this is going on. And I think unfortunately America has this real like tendency to push back against advocacy from celebrities, and in
Mhm.
this case musicians, like even if they agree with the cause, even somebody as like cosmically famous as Bono, if he gives a speech for 45 seconds about the evils of apartheid, about how millions of people are starving in the Sudan, you know, his own audience will tell him to shut up. And so, but Van Zant was not willing to kowtow to that pressure.
Mhm.
He thought people needed to know about these things, and it reached a certain point where that pressure, the pressure he was putting on himself, was too much. Like it
Right.
became all consuming. He had to sort of
Yeah.
step back and in the same way step back from making music because that grind was too much on him. And
Yeah.
his
Well, I think part of that was he was doing literally the kind of lead by example thing. Like he wasn't
yeah
just reading a document about it or listening to a brief summary of the thing. Like he was getting involved in the understanding of it. Like he you know
yeah he went to South Africa.
he
He
like he oh, what's that expression? He walked the talk. He didn't
Mhm.
just it wasn't it was a genuine advocacy because like it was not that other people aren't sincere about what they're doing, but just like he got so involved, he walked away from. I mean, he later used music to support those things, but and to help bring the awareness to it. But it was, and it's funny because Springsteen says something in the video, and he's like, when we started the band, he was like, no politics, and he's like, a couple years later, he's like, all politics,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
it's all statement, and I just think that was really interesting. And how you commented on his wife, and then later, what it shows, like kind of him like coming back into things, like how he was one of the first syndicated. I might be saying this wrong. Satellite radio shows,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah,
how those
so
different things were like
he
just
started in
sampling. Yeah,
terrestrial radio, and then that transitioned into satellite radio. So he's been in the radio game for, as long as I've been an adult, like 20 years at least. And so and that's another, I think, amazing thing about this documentary is how elegantly it tells so much of his life to go from his musicianship, his personal relationships, his family, his advocacy, and his time in radio, and you don't feel like you're missing huge chunks of it.
yeah,
Like it is 2.5 hours, but it never drags. Certainly, like it's
no,
moving all the time, and you feel like a full portrait has been painted of this guy's extraordinary life, for the last 50 years,
yeah.
and of course his acting in The Sopranos, which
I was gonna say, yeah,
yeah,
and that's
yeah.
kind of it's not the end of it, but it's later in the documentary. But like he gets into that, and his wife even got to join him as his
Mhm.
wife in the show. Um, it's just, you know, the only really gap was where he says something, he's like, after the advocacy stuff, he's like, and then I walked my dog for 7 years.
Yeah. And even then he's like, but then yeah, I produced like 3 albums in that
Right.
time, and it's like,
Right.
okay, you did a little more.
Yeah. But like that was the only thing that like felt like a gap, but it wasn't like a gap because there wasn't anything to say. Like there was no information. It was just kind of like, yeah, you know, I just
Yeah.
kind of sat down for a minute. But um but yeah, well, so again, documentaries aren't for everybody, but I'm really glad I watched this. Like I said, I found it very inspiring, especially the stuff about South Africa, because in a way, just the way my events in my life have played out, and because of some of the things he's done, like I feel like he's had an impact on some of the awareness I had of these
Yeah.
things as a kid, because he did so much. So like it just was really intriguing. I'm really glad we watched it.
Yeah.
Tell your friend Bill, it was a fantastic job directing. And folks, if you enjoy music, if you enjoy a good story about someone's life, definitely go check this out. It's currently on Max.
Yeah.
And again, it's called Stevie Van Zandt Disciple. Yeah.
Yeah, so I really appreciate you having me on to talk about it, and just real quick, you know,
Yeah.
it really establishes sort of the how the Sun City record and Stevie Van Zandt advocacy really, I think, was a tipping point in America for not just awareness, but the urgency to free Nelson Mandela and overturn apartheid, because it was just one of those things that, you know, Americans can be a little disengaged. Like we all agreed that apartheid was bad, but I
Right.
think America for the longest time was like, "What are you gonna do?" But I think the Sun City record and Van Zandt's advocacy made it so that America could not turn away.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, and I really appreciate how much the documentary um, told that story. And so thank you, Jesse, so much for watching
No,
with me
thank
in the first place, and thank you for having me on to talk about it. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for coming on. I know you worked a long day today, so thank you. And
My pleasure.
is tell folks where they can find you. You got any?
Yeah, I am at Quasar Sniffer on the social medias, um, and I have my own movie podcast called Popcorn Eschaton with a logo drawn by one Jesse Arnold. And we talk about religion and politics in movies. Sometimes when those topics are the text, and sometimes when maybe they're a little bit more subtextual. So like we've done topics ranging from the Last Temptation of Christ to the 36th Chamber of Shaolin. So we
Okay.
run the gamut, and it's fun. So
Awesome.
thank you.
You're welcome. I'll have those links in the description and everything. So, folks, thanks for stopping by today. Members, enjoy this a couple of days early before everyone else. And for those watching it Wednesday or later, thank you for stopping in. Hope you have a great week. And I don't really have we haven't figured our sign off for this yet. So, let me find my button here. Until next time, what are you shooting?